Welcome to our next episode of Conversations with Yogis. My name is Ashley, and I'm here with Melinda to talk about how to choose your yoga teacher training program today. And we're doing this episode based on the fact that we get so many questions all the time from our students and other people about our recommendations for teacher training programs and if this one's good, if this one's not good, etc., etc. So we're gonna make an episode just to address those questions. So hopefully, if this is of interest of you, you can find some guidance here on how to pick the best yoga teacher training program for yourself. Hey,
Yes.
Melinda, welcome.
Hello. I'm in a way excited to get this episode done because I definitely get this question so often. And then I've got sent to so many teacher trainings courses, so I can have to look at them and like, oh God, it is hard to choose nowadays because back in the days when we did our teacher training, there were like 3 in a year. So it wasn't too much of options, but now they're like plethora, like so many different teacher trainings. I find it's like almost like when can you have the time? And then you have anytime you can just do your teacher training. And back in the days we had to think about like, oh, I have to make time for this teacher training because there's not many. So it's a lot has changed, and I do feel like also it became such a big business, money making business, because if you know yoga teachers earn peanuts. So if you have been teaching for a while, you think, okay, maybe I should be a teacher trainer because I can earn some money and not scrape the bottom of things because you don't earn enough. But because of that, there are so many teacher trainings that are not as good, because I would feel my teachers have been teaching and practicing for 20, 30 years before they decided to be teacher trainers. And nowadays people teach teachers who've been teaching very little. And yeah, we just want to give you guidance of how to choose. So what do you think, Ashley, what would be the first thing you would look at if you're looking at teacher trainings?
Yeah, it's hard nowadays. Like you said, like there's so many teacher training programs that have been created from the place of scarcity and the need to generate more revenue, which is like, I don't think a reason to do a yoga teacher training program. Like you should be delivering a yoga teacher training program because you're at a level that you can train teachers and share the practice from an authentic place of living it for many, many, many years. And for me, I would look at where the teachers learn from themselves, what their lineages are, what styles of yoga they teach, because you want to go to a teacher training program that you're going to enjoy the style of yoga that's being taught. I am an Ashtangi, I love Vinyasa, I love Rocket, so those are the types of yoga that I look for. But if you want something different than that, then look for like maybe Hatha or Iyengar or Jivamukti. Pick the type that you want to explore further, that you enjoy practicing, because you want to be teaching something that you enjoy practicing because it comes from a place of authenticity. I look at how many years the teachers have been teaching and feedback from students, if there's like testimonials. Sometimes they can be helpful. Sometimes the testimonials are pretty vague and people will just, say, oh yeah, it was really good. So it's not really that helpful. So I do a lot of research into a teacher training program. Price is definitely a factor too. Like some are way more expensive than others. They can vary by thousands of dollars, thousands of pounds. And then I'd also choose based on like if you want to go somewhere and have it as a immersive travel concentrated yoga teacher training program that you do in a month in a nice tropical location. Start looking there, ask people around there for recommendations in yoga studios around there, or people that you know professionally, like your yoga teachers or other students that have trained. And then sometimes people don't have the luxury of going off for a month because they have responsibilities at home that they can't leave for that long. So looking at a program that delivers a curriculum that aligns with your schedule and responsibilities that you have if you want to stay in your city or town, and do it once a month for an intensive weekend, for example, I think is quite a common format for people who are doing it in their home city.
Yes. I think you touched base on a lot of important things, and having so many teacher trainings now gives you the luxury of you can actually choose and think about these things. I was lucky back in the day that my teacher did an intensive course that, so if you want to be a yoga teacher, first you have to do a 200-hour teacher training course, and that can be done in 28 days intensive or can be over time. And I remember back in the day, I didn't have time to go away for 28 days, or also I wasn't sure if I can survive 28 days of doing intensive, very hard Ashtanga yoga classes and rocket classes. And I'm glad I didn't, because probably I would have died physically. I did over 3 months, every weekend, most weekends, Friday evening practice and Saturday, Sunday intensive days. And still every Monday, I couldn't walk up the stairs because I was so broken. So for me, it worked very well. And I was lucky my teachers, my chosen teachers, have done that way. I also do think that you're talking about having vague testimonials on websites saying like, oh, it was good. I think a yoga teacher training shouldn't be just good. It should be life-changing. It should be something that they break, like we've talked about this, they break you on the teacher training, like physically, emotionally, break down your problems, because we always believe that if you're going to stand out in front of a group of people, sometimes quite a big group of people, you're going to have things projected onto you, people's their problem. You say something or you teach something and it can trigger people, they can act out on it. And if you don't have your shit together, really, or you haven't worked on your own problems, then it will be very hard to handle that situation. So I think as a yoga teacher, you have the responsibility of being sure within yourself, which is, as we said, you have to constantly work on before you can stand in front of a group of people and try to solve their problem, which is you're not solving their problems, and you have to hold space, and you have to know how to react to these things. And if it didn't happen to you on teacher training or throughout your practice, then it will be very hard to handle those situations.
Yeah. I've heard feedback from people who have done teacher training programs. They've said like, oh, it was okay. And I'm like, really? Your first teacher training program was just okay? Like, because I feel, well, I had really profound experiences I've done 200-hour teacher training programs. The first one I picked based on location. I wanted to go to India, so I went to India and I picked one that had a nice website and looked legit. I wouldn't recommend anyone go there now, and I'm not going to say the name, but if you want to look on my website and see where I studied, it's labeled on there. Just because there's been a lot of sexual abuse and predatory sexual behavior from people who are in charge there, and that is 100% not okay with me. I was on to that. Like when I was there, I perceived it and I didn't feel safe in that space. But we had a really great philosophy and meditation teacher who saved the training for me and made me have a profound experience within that other darker stuff going on. So that the meditation teacher is no longer there. Again, if you want to ask me about the meditation teacher, he's in India and he was absolutely incredible. So you can go study with him in Goa and Dharmashala, and I'd highly, highly recommend this person to study with. But the original teacher training that he was teaching for, I would not recommend. I did my second one so that was a month intensive, and yes, like you said, Ashtanga Vinyasa every day. I was broken physically and mentally. Like I I got like sometimes people call it a yoga flu. Like when you're working through so much stuff in your body quite intensely, illnesses that have been suppressed can start to come out. And this is quite a well-known thing in like the naturopathic world, is when you're working on like detoxes and cleanses and changing physical practices, you can actually get sick before you get better because stuff has been hiding in your body, if you want to visualize it like that. So I got really sick on this training because like my body was broken, which it was a good thing. It was a part of the healing process. It's not all self-love and roses and like nice back bends. It's hard confrontational work that you go through. And so like I was physically broken, but then rebuilt with all of these tools that like made me learn a lot about myself. So within that, it was such a profound, life-changing experience that I had. And if people are coming and saying, you know, oh, my teacher training was fine, I'm like, really? Like, I was broken to my core and then rebuilt. And then I did my second one with my teacher in Canada. And in a way that I'm glad I did the first one in India and then did my second one with him, because I feel like I had learned all the concepts, which are all these new Sanskrit words, all these new philosophical ideas that I couldn't really grasp yet and get my head around. And then by the time I did my teacher training with him, I had an idea of what I was getting into, and I was more open into understanding the practice, and that one was even more life-changing for me. It was done in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, over half of a year. We did 1 month intensive one weekend every month, and that equated to the 200-hour program. And yeah, so it's hard for me to recommend personally a teacher training program, because the one that I would recommend is in Canada, and I don't think he's even running it anymore. I would recommend my teacher, my meditation teacher from India, who's in Goa and Dharmashala. And then Charlotte was recommending her teacher too. So do ask around, just because I did mine 12 years ago, so there's just so many other options out there and different styles of teaching and teachers, and it's an overload of choice. I didn't have a lot of choice back then, like you said, but
yeah,
there's a lot to choose from, and maybe I'm not necessarily the best person to give advice on specifics because I haven't taken them.
And I think also, like, we are not here to give specifics because people can do their own research, but also I think it's a good point. A good starting point is ask your favorite teachers where they've trained. I mean, that's what I did. I had a few favorite teachers and I checked where they trained. I stalked them, not asked them, but you can go after them and ask them. I'm sure they would be really happy to share their opinion. And I want to go back to that you said, like, on a teacher training being broken down and being rebuilt. And that's a very good point, that it's not just that you need to be broken down. There has to be a space for you to be able to rebuild yourself, because breaking people down is not that hard. You can very easily pull the bear in the bush. It is just being supportive enough and being knowledgeable enough to help them rebuild. And that's important, because I have heard experiences of my students who said that, oh, we had all these like very hardcore classes, but it's just like they've been kind of like shown off, like, what can you teach or what can you experience, but they were not actually learned from it. So there are teacher trainings that are listing like, oh, this famous teacher, that famous teacher, they're going to be teaching you class. So you go for like, oh my God, they are also such great teachers, and they're going to teach you a great class. But if they're not staying there to teach you their experience or teaching more, you then just experience a hardcore class, and what can you take away from that? So I think that's one problem can be with the teacher training, is just listing too many famous people, whether it's Instagram famous people or just famous teachers, and not actually giving more time with them to learn from them, just like practicing with them. Or the other problem I've seen when I was sent a few teacher training is, there was one teacher training that said, like, in this 200 hours, you're going to learn Hatha yoga, yin yoga, restorative yoga, rocket yoga, vinyasa yoga, and such lists. Like, whoa, hang on. How the hell could you learn so much? You do 200 hours on one thing, and then you do 100 hours on yin. then, I mean, you can do yin and things in less than 100 hours, but if you want to have experience or you want to be knowledgeable in different yoga styles, you can't do 200 hours on 15 different styles. It's impossible. Also, do you want to be jack of all trades and master of none? Because that's, you're going to be just have a little sprinkle of everything, and it's not really useful. So choose a 200 hours that's focusing on one thing and teaching you basis, and not like 200 hours on something crazy already. So I mean, that's what would be my takeaways. Like, check the curriculum, check what they offer, and check if it sounds reasonable to learn so much in 200 hours. Because you think 200 hours is a lot. It's not. It's not.
You just scratch the surface. It's like mind-blowing, the philosophy that you learn. And it's like, you should be learning yoga philosophy in your yoga teacher training program, and like anatomy and basic sequencing and how to teach a class. But like you said, like I've seen curriculums that are teaching everything, and I'm like, what are you actually going to leave from this training being able to do and teach? Like nothing. It's like, and then if you're doing that many types of yoga, then what else are you leaving out? Like, is there philosophy and meditation being left out? Is there anatomy being left out? Like, I don't understand, like, because it's still a 200-hour program, so those hours have to be allocated in specific places, right? Like, I don't want to learn restorative, yin, hatha, ashtanga, vinyasa, rocket, iyengar in one teacher training. It's impossible. Like, personally, you do your teacher training. I did my first one in ashtanga vinyasa, so I had a solid sequence to teach when I left.
Yeah.
And then my second training was in sattva yoga, and my teacher had 4 sequences that he used, specific sequences, and he gave them to us to go out there and teach and be like, this is an amazing sequence, teach it, become good at teaching this and explaining it. Because when you first leave your teacher training program, you need to develop a vocabulary when you're explaining how to do yoga to other people, because you know how to do it in yourself. Like, I know how to do triangle pose, but like, how do I tell somebody who's not done triangle pose how to do triangle pose and keep the practice flowing? Like, it takes a while to develop that. So you want to have something that you can work on, and then later on you can decide to specialize, like I have done in rocket. Like, I've done 5 rocket trainings with David Cox. I liked how rocket teachers were teaching, and so I went to him because he had such high recommendations. And you had to go back every year to become more specialized in it, because you have to learn, you have to go out and teach it and be like, recognize like your areas where you need improvement, and then you go back, refine, and learn more, and then go back out into the world, and then you go back. Like, you don't just take one training and go out there, you're like done, hands washed, I'm done, I'm a specialist, trained in this type of yoga. You have to keep going back. Like, I'm 12 years into teaching now, and I still go back and do yoga teacher trainings, and I have done some that are just like asana based like classes, and I'm like, we didn't even really talk about anything to do with yoga. We didn't talk about like sequencing or different variations, postures. It was just like hard classes, and I'm like, what did I actually learn from that? I've got more hours to put towards my total yoga teaching hours, but I mean, it was good for my self practice, but like for developing me as a teacher, maybe not so much. So there's all these variables that come into it. Like, what do you want to get out of it? What do you want to specialize in afterwards?
It's a very good point as well, that first you need to choose your 200 hours, and they will give you a good basis, and then you have to go out and teach or have a little bit of experience of teaching, and then decide like what I want to specialize in, what I want to learn more of. Because I had students who done 200 hours and then jumped into the next training, and they would ask like, oh, should I do this before I start teaching? Like, no, teach people, because you need to experience, and then you have to see again the gaps, as you said, of where you need to improve or where do you need to learn more. And that's why some teacher trainings, there are different teacher trainings for everything. And with Charlotte, we talked about like different ways of approaching yoga, like meditations and breath work. So you can go out and learn that. So there's so many things that you can learn. And there will be always places that you can go and learn more from. But it's just important that just you let what you learned to sink in. Because otherwise, if you don't have time it sink in, then you just like keep learning and learning and learning and actually not really digesting that information in a way. So I think that's important part as well.
Yeah, putting it into practice is really important because you, as we all know, yoga is not a theoretical practice. It is a lived experiential practice. So is teaching. To become a good teacher, people are going to be coming into yoga teacher trainings with different backgrounds. Like I'd never taught anything before, so I was totally new to teaching anything. And I see other people that I know who taught other disciplines, and so when they come into teaching yoga, they've already like mastered the teaching part, so it's just teaching a new discipline that they have to learn. Like I had to learn like standing in front of people, building my confidence, like sucking it up. I was terrified when I did my first classes, like terrified, shitting my pants basically, because I was shy my whole life, if you can believe. and now I don't even think about standing in front of other people because I'm so sure of myself as a teacher, but it's taken so many years of professional development. It wasn't just a 2-hour training. It was multiple trainings going back, identifying my areas where I needed more. Like I've done voice coach training. I've done like how to project your voice with your diaphragm, breathwork trainings, like more into meditation trainings. I teach adjustments courses as well. Like that's more of a specialty. I don't think you're well equipped to give adjustments from a 2-hour training because everything else is just so overwhelming. I think that's like something that comes a bit later and a skill that you want to develop later into your teaching career. And then come back, because like adjustments, it's scary touching people and like thinking that you're gonna hurt them at the beginning and like, oh, am I doing this wrong? And it does take time to build the confidence and assurance that you know what you're doing. And then even still, like, I have to refine. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I've never tried that variation of adjustment. That looks cool. Like, maybe I'll try that on my students too. So be open to continued learning. Always, always, always.
Because there are going to be always like more advanced postures you haven't adjusted yet, or you've seen it being done, but you actually never tried it yourself.
Yeah.
And also, I think with adjustments as well, if you're unsure of what you're doing or how you're doing, just don't adjust it. Don't physically adjust. Just also how you want to teach. Some people like to teach energetically or where to direct your energy. Some people like to be very like, put your right hand here, left foot there. Everyone's teaching very differently and how they approach it. And on different teacher trainings, you learn different ways of teaching, and then you can learn more the more you do it. So I think it's important.
Like how to cue is something to go back and refine, because you need to do a lot of self-reflection work on, catching when you're teaching words that you say repetitively, like, well, what I just did there now, like,
Yeah. In a way, when Zoom came in to our teaching, it was very useful for me because when I edited my videos or rewatched myself, which I hated, probably no one likes to watch themselves or hear themselves talk, but then you can hear the things you repeat or the things you fill up the gaps. Like I used to say so often. It's like, so, did I say so? There was something that I had to eradicate out of my teaching, but it was like 4 years ago now. I don't even remember what it was, but it was something I constantly just filled the gaps with. And like, why do I say that? And it must be annoying for students as well. So it's self-reflection of your own teaching and being okay with like, oh my God, I said that and I shouldn't have said that. And then be okay and just move on and say the right thing.
like namaste.
Yeah. That's the thing is, but also so many people like, yeah, my teacher used to say, one of my teachers used to say Jai in the end. And then I think you were saying that you asked one of your students who asked their parents, like, is Jai mean anything? And they're like, well, not really. And I'm like, so what should I say in the end of the class? It's questioning what you say, what you do, and then trying to inform yourself to change things.
Yeah. like getting rid of those weird things yoga teachers say too once they start teaching because they heard their teacher said it, like what was a twist to detoxify your body.
I think that's always going to come up in Instagram as well, because it's something that really bugs me as well. And
your liver detoxifies you. You don't get to do that from a twist.
No, but that's, if you go on the last audition I've done was 2021 or something, I don't remember. And a teacher did say that on the audition. And I was like, oh no, don't say that. And in the end, she actually got classes there and was like, oh, well, hang on. So you're just like, I'm sorry, it's after years, you kind of like, this is not where you're just being judgmental in your head. And then I'm like, oh, I'm not judging. But also when they get the classes, I was like, then I start judging. It's interesting, but also it's good self-reflection on myself. It's like what you talk to yourself in your head. But yeah, okay, I went far away from the teacher trainings. Anything else specific we can think about that would be useful for people?
I mean, when you're picking a training, you might also want to consider like the community that you'll be a part of. If it will help you in advancing like your career, being known amongst other yoga teachers too. Like I know, I'm sorry to say it is a thing. You can get into places based on who you know because you can start to cover for them because they know you, right? And it can help you if you want to be a yoga teacher. It can help like based on who you know and what kind of connections you create.
It's in this world as well, it still opens doors, especially nowadays. There's so little amount of studios are still existing in London, if we talk about London, that so many studios have had to close their doors because of pandemic and everything. So it still matters who you know and what kind of community you're part of. So it is an important part.
Yeah. And I think the last thing we were going to talk about is what to do if you want to learn about more about yoga, but you don't want to be a teacher.
Yeah, that's a good point, because not everyone wants to be a teacher. Like I went to my 200 hours thinking I might not want to be a teacher, but what I find is there's so many teacher trainings that are teaching you to be the teacher, but there are not many that are actually teaching you the knowledge, but you don't have to teach it. So that's another little gap in the...
Yeah, I've seen some programs out there that are for people who want to deep dive into yoga without teaching it, which is interesting. It is a gap in the market. I mean, something that we both talked about exploring in the future. So, I mean, watch the space. Like I try to put more information out there in terms of like Instagram posts and my blogs that I write, and I have yoga philosophy talks on my website, and then like of course all the topics that we touch base on in our podcast too. You have to go outside of the classroom, the yoga class, to do continued learning, because as a teacher, like I drip feed like little bits of yoga philosophy here and there, but I don't want to be standing at the front talking about yoga philosophy because that's your time. I don't want to be talking in your time to practice yoga. They don't go together.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and some people might disagree based on the lineage of yoga that they teach. Like I come from the Ashtanga lineage where it's self-practice, it's quiet, there's no music, you are in tune with your breath. I want minimal instructions from the teacher. So that's where I am coming from. Of course, I'm like telling people things to do in their postures because engagement and direction is important for keeping your body safe and supported and to learn. But I'm not going to explain every single detail about triangle pose because then that's just too much. Your attention is outwards instead of inwards, where I want to get your attention inwards to you because it's your practice, it's not my practice. And the students learn how to practice yoga in the classroom maybe some bits of philosophy, but then out of that, you can go do listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, reading books. There's so many good books. Like we were talking about Anno Dea Judith on the previous podcast. There's a book, One Simple Thing, called by Eddie Stern, that's really good for people who want to know about yoga, who are new to all the philosophies. He talks about it in really like lay terminology that a Westerner mind can grasp, the spirituality and all the esoteric concepts of the practice. Love that book, One Simple Thing by Eddie Stern.
Doing little immersions, weekends, workshops, immersions.
Retreats, like we talk about, we do things on our retreats too, do extra workshops and talks and discussions, and you have more time to reflect. Yeah, there's lots you can do. You just have to look at like how you want it packaged up, like what kind of work you want to do, what your time frame is, things like that, cost.
Main thing is don't be afraid to ask questions or question things on you can always just ask the providers, you can ask different teachers. I do find when someone has lots of students and you get the same questions all the time, it's quite tiring. And also if you're trying to choose a 200-hour teacher training course, and it's for us now, it's hard to look at them, because as you said, like our teachers might not do 200 hours anymore, and that would be my first thing I would recommend is my teachers, because I trust them and I've been there. But there are all these new teacher trainings that I don't know enough about. So in a way, sometimes asking your favorite teacher might not be very helpful. It would be better if you ask people who trained with them, ask people who are trainers at this place, instead of asking your teachers. Yes, because it's very hard to relate it to, because there's too many teacher training nowadays, and too many options, and we haven't been there. So how can we really judge it or like say things about it when we can just look at the same website as you do? So ask your teachers where they trained. Then you might find good teacher trainings there, but you might have to do your own research and ask people who are right there at the teacher training.
Yeah.
But I think this is something that we wanted to just be short and to the point. So if you have any questions, please do let us know, or if there's anything else we can cover about this. This is all we could think about just in this short time. Anything else you want to add, Ashley?
I don't think so. I had something in my head, but I forgot, so that's fine.
Sometimes I think that I should be taking notes as I listen to you, because sometimes like, I want to kind of react to it, but then I forget by the time I get back.
Then you forget, like, what you were saying, like, ask your favorite teachers, but my information based on my personal experience is like irrelevant. Oh, I wanted to, since I was giving shout outs to other people, I'm just going to shout out my like meditation and philosophy teacher in India. It's Keshava Murthy. His yoga company is called Sarvanguna Yoga. And I haven't personally been a student of Sarvanguna Yoga, but I have of Keshava. And he is a doctor of yoga from India. And just an inspiring soul to learn from, and the most kind person, one of the most kind person that I met. And I will be going back to do some meditation training with him at some point in the future. So if you're asking me for a recommendation, that would be my recommendation. But again, personal preference, because I don't know what type of physical asana they teach there. I'm not interested in learning physical asana anymore because I go down the Ashtanga path. So I'm not going to training for that aspect. So if you are going more for the physical aspect, then look at what they're teaching.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Clear expectations of what you're going to get, because if you want a strong practice and they're not giving that to you, then you might leave disappointed.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
That's why you have to check curriculum and what they teach and how they teach it, because otherwise you're gonna pay lots of money, because teacher trainings are getting more and more expensive, and there's no point to just throw your money around unless you want to. It's none of our business if you do want to.
Yeah.
But yes, well, thank you very much, and yeah, see you soon in the next episode.